Hopefully everyone had a great break. I want to welcome you again to the Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center State of Environmental Determinants in the African American Community 11th Summit. And we're beginning our second session where we will feature our guest speaker, Catherine Coleman Flowers. Ms. Flowers is the founder and CEO of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, CREEJ, and one of the nation's most influential voices on environmental justice and rural poverty. She holds an honorary doctorate of environmental science from Wesleyan University and has been recognized with some of the world's most prestigious honors, including the MacArthur Genius Fellowship, Time 100, Forbes 50 over 50, Forbes' inaugural 50 Global Leaders in Sustainability, and the 2025 Time Earth Award. Ms. Flowers serves on the Broadway Green Alliance Advisory Council and sits on the boards of the Climate Reality Project and the Natural Resources Defense Council, helping shape national and global climate strategy. She is the author of Holy Ground on Activism, Environmental Justice, and Finding Hope and Waste, One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret. Both books received the Southern Environmental Law Center's Reed Environmental Book Award 2002 and 2026, underscoring her impact as both a storyteller and an advocate. Ms. Flowers' work has been featured in The New Yorker, The New York Times, and 60 Minutes, and she has appeared on the cover of Time Magazine's 2025 Earth Awards edition, cementing her role as a leading champion for environmental equity and human dignity. Without further ado, I want to welcome to the stage Ms. Catherine Coleman Flowers, where the title of her presentation will be based on her book, her influential book, that we encourage you to read and to share widely with your networks and organizations and colleagues, friends, and family, entitled Holy Ground on Activism, Environmental Justice, and Finding Hope, and her other book, Waste, One Woman's Fight Against America's Dirty Secret.
You know, I spent a lot of time in Sunday school. And in Sunday school, I was told stories where people beat the odds. David and Goliath, how David was able to slay a giant with a slingshot. Those stories of inspiration have always inspired me to speak up, speak out, and take action. I don't think that there's anyone that doesn't want their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and the seventh generation not to have access to clean water. My name is Catherine Coleman Flowers. I am from Alabama. I am the founding director of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice. I was influenced as an activist by my parents. I remember people coming from other areas to visit and to stay in Lowndes County, Alabama, because they wanted to help the community fight for democracy and also have some type of economic prosperity. In 2001, I had started my own company and I was doing economic development. We found out that people were being arrested because they didn't have septic systems or functioning septic systems, and that's how I got involved. And it was a compound of mobile homes. They're all family members. We could actually see the raw sewage going down the side of the road. When we got out of the car, a man came to Mr. Woodson crying. He said that he was a minister and he could no longer have services at his church because he didn't have a functioning septic system. That's when I realized how extreme it was.
The sewage comes up in her bathtub, come up in the sewage that goes on the floor.
When she talked about the lagoons, it's like a lake full of raw sewage. It's right on the other side of those homes. In Lowndes County, Alabama, actually throughout the state of Alabama, but certainly in Lowndes County, Alabama, we know that at least 90% of the septic systems or the on-site systems are failing.
If it rains, if it got too full, it will overflow. It will come back up in my bathtub or the bathroom.
This is not just a Lowndes County issue, and I think when people look at it in isolation like that, they missed the boat. And what we don't want is infrastructure that's going to keep failing. It's not just a Lowndes County or an Alabama problem, and that's why we call it America's dirty secret. The other problem is that with climate change, we're seeing tropical diseases emerging. In the parasite study that we conducted, more than 33% of the people tested positive for some form of hookworm. I think when the Clean Water Act was put in place, it was well-intentioned, but I think that we're now talking about it because it's not just a plumbing problem. It's because we have developed wastewater infrastructure that cannot deal with the current reality.
I think we can find some solutions that will work
I agree.
and solve these problems long term, and something that's accessible for everybody, for the average American.
We have not solved this problem even since I was a child, and it's still going on today.
I'm hopeful, and that's one of the reasons why we're here in Huntsville, Alabama, because we feel that the solutions are here.
This issue on a global scale, needs to be fixed.
We're here with all these scientists and engineers, and the Marshall Space Flight Center is here. The Space Command is going to be locating here, and the technology that they have could potentially be useful as we look for long-term solutions. We're going to have to come up with ways in which we can recycle and reuse water, because water is a finite resource, and once it's gone, there will be no life. And we can figure out ways in which we can build houses differently. We may not even need sewage pipes. Well, houses where it could potentially just be treated there at the house. And when it comes out, it's clean, it can be reused.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
As we look at the Artemis moon mission, one of the things that they're going to have to deal with is how they treat solids. And they haven't come up with a solution yet, as far as we know. But if they do come up with a solution, that solution could potentially be deployed into places around the United States and around the world where they're having problems with sanitation. And we have to understand that a lot of the solutions that NASA uses can sometimes be scaled down to where we can use them on a household level. And that could change how we treat sanitation and also how we use water. So that would be a great ending to the story, and hopefully it starts here in Huntsville.
You like that picture? It's Lola.
It's Lola.
Yes, it's Lola.
We put profit over the people and the planet. We need to change that paradigm. And that paradigm shift means that we should put people, and we should also put the planet over profit.
What is
Turn
that?
the page.
I find hope in children when I see how they're just loving and living life, not worried about anything yet. We have to make sure that they have a future.
Gigi helps everybody be able to have clean water, right?
We have to make sure that they get to experience democracy, that they get a chance to drink clean water. And that's what I got an award for helping take care of the earth.
Isn't that good? I think so too. You give Gigi a high five. Say, good job.
It's a
Thumbs up.
Good morning. I bring you greetings from Huntsville, Alabama. My name is Catherine Coleman Flowers. It is an honor and a blessing to be here and to share with you on the work that I am doing with the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice around not only access to clean water and sanitation, but recently our mission has expanded to include data centers, because data centers are also, the way they're being built in many areas is also a threat
to our access to clean water, clean air, and also not having soil contaminated. So, first of all, thank you again for having me here. And I am honored to be invited to be able to speak to my relatives that are probably in Ohio. I am the product of a lot of my family members are members of a part of the Great Migration and ended up settling in Ohio. And we had the opportunity to go to Ohio to look at environmental justice issues. Last year, we went to a place in Ohio called East Palestine, where there was a train derailment. And this train had derailed, and there was lots of chemicals that were spilled, and people are impacted by it. And one of the things that we're learning, and the way I'm expanding my work, is to talk about how we're all in harm's way at this time because there are no regulations to govern um, how these industries are supposed to behave and whether or not they create health disparities and damage to folk, and it's happening everywhere. Formerly served on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council under the Biden administration, where I served as co-vice president. And one of the things that I often talked about with with members of the WEJAG who represented communities from across the United States, indigenous communities, communities in Alaska, communities that were in the Southwest and living in desert communities where their water sources were being drained or they were exposed to toxins. And one of the things that I learned is that we're all in harm's way. Although I felt that it was very important for me to write Holy Ground. Holy Ground was written prior to the last general election, but I felt we needed to talk about environmental justice and we also need to talk about hope. So in Holy Ground, I wrote a number of essays that shared my experience dealing with EJ. But on the WeJack, one of the things I talked about is that I knew that we were entering an era where it didn't matter what your race was. I think that when we tell people that they were only, that their race is the only thing that's going to impact whether or not they're in an EJ community, we're leaving a whole lot of people out that are being exposed. And East Palestine was an example of that. More recently, in Lowndes County, Alabama, which is where I am from, we're now dealing with more environmental justice issues. All of the work that I've done and I've been recognized for is because I grew up in Lowndes County, Alabama, a very rural, very poor community, but very rich in history. If you know anything about the voting rights movement and the Selma to Montgomery March, most of the Selma to Montgomery March goes through Lowndes County. It's a 54-mile route from Selma going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and then most of it going through Lowndes County before getting to Montgomery. Lowndes County had always had a rich history, going back to the sharecroppers movement, and W.E.B. Du Bois actually spent time in Lowndes County, and it shaped his philosophy on movement and how he approached sociology. And then, of course, later, Lowndes County was known for its involvement in the voting rights movement, and the original Black Panther Party was actually founded in Lowndes County and not in Oakland. It was the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. There's a book by a professor at Ohio State University, Hassan Jeffries, entitled Bloody Lowndes. If you're interested in learning more about our history, please read that book because it tells you a lot about what happened in the past, but also give you some insight on what's happening currently and what will happen in the future if we don't get involved and don't vote. But in this book, it tells our history, and that gave birth to the movement that I'm so much a part of and that I owe so much to. I was able to do the work that I do on environmental justice and finding out about the sanitation issue because of the work that my parents who were activists did before me. So it was very easy for me to return to a community which I was a part of, and people could look in my face and tell I was a Coleman. And for them to be able to share with me one of the most intimate things that they were dealing with, which is the fact that they didn't have access to sanitation, that when they flushed their toilets, it went out on top of the ground. Or in a lot of cases, if they did have a septic tank, it would come back into their homes because it was failing. And the way the state at that time decided to deal with it when I got involved in 2002 was arresting people. And that was, I did cut my teeth on activism there. I actually was an activist in high school. And I tell that story in ways where we were able to remove my principal when I was in the 11th grade, because he was, I'm not going to tell the story again, but basically he was not about education. And as a result, he had to be removed. And we were also able to change the name of our school, which was Lowndes County Training School. And the reason it was a training school, because in the South, all the Black high schools were training schools. And I had the opportunity to visit Senator Ted Kennedy when I served as an intern that summer. And when I visited his office, he said that training schools outside of the South were schools for delinquent kids. So I went back to school uh, in my senior year, determined to change the name and make sure that name was not on my diploma. And I was able to do that. But all of those skills helped me when I returned to Lowndes County in 2002 to do this work. And because of the work that I had done as a high school student, and also the work my parents continued to do up until their deaths, it helped me to develop the trust in the community, because we can't find out things or work with community without first having trust. Number two, listening, and also letting them lead, because it was people in the community that kept telling me, Catherine, I'm sick all the time. There's something happening with my stomach. I think that there's something in the water, which ultimately led to me reaching out to Dr. Peter Hotez and doing the parasite study, which led to me getting the MacArthur Award. So it is very important that we talk to people in the community. It's very important that we talk to everybody in the community. So more recently, because of the work that I've done, I received outreach from people in Lowndes County asking me to get involved, because they're building a hyperscale data center on the Selma to Montgomery March Trail, and they were very concerned about that. Because of my relationships with other people, other organizations that I've worked with, I've been able to get them access to the resources that they need in order to figure out what's going on, and hopefully have an impact on whether or not it is put in that particular location, or how it's built, or whether or not they use renewable energy, or whether or not it's built there at all. Because the democracy has been taken away from the process, and the people have found out about this after the plans are made, but they are very engaged in trying to see if they can make a difference. Because oftentimes the health harms that are created by industry coming to communities are not addressed. In this case, I found something very different, and this is what my next book is going to be about. The opposition to the data center looked different than what I'm used to seeing in Lowndes County. The last time I've seen this type of coming together of people across racial and economic lines was when they were trying to put a landfill along the Selma to Montgomery Marsh Trail next to the site where activist Viola Liuzzo was killed. And at that particular time, I remember I had just moved back home from Detroit, and there was a gathering of people on that site to protest, and Jesse Jackson came. And I just remember I had never seen that many local white people participate in a movement dealing with any kind of issue, and it helped me to understand the importance of environmental issues and how they impact all of us, and the harm that it could create for all of us. Now we're seeing the same type of coming together. Even across America, what we're seeing is that people that generally don't join these kinds of fights are fighting because their wells are running dry, their power bills are going up, they can't sleep because of the noise that's coming from these data centers. So our organization, the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, decided that we would expand our mission to include providing a clearinghouse for communities to get information about data centers. And we're also hosting a summit in October where we're going to bring together different people. It's a summit where we're sending out invitations to have a conversation about how to do this better. Because right now, without having they're not being open about what they're doing, and also making sure that there's the type of research that's done to make sure that there's no harm done. Because one of the first principles of environmental justice is do no harm. And now we're seeing that people are fighting that normally don't see themselves as victims of environmental harm or environmental justice, but we all are. In the community where I live right now, a community that's generally very affluent, but I'm not very far from a nuclear reactor. I'm not very far from a Superfund site. And although people here have cast a blind eye to the environmental harms that they may be experiencing, now people are becoming a lot more conscious of it. And the data center fight, especially, has brought a lot of people together that normally would not be together, even to the point that it is impacting elections. So, in this book, the one that I wrote, Holy Ground, in this one, I thought that it was very important for us to talk about, for us to understand the impact of money on elections. But I also wanted people to understand, at least from my vantage point, my spirituality and how my spirituality impacts the work that I do. And I weaved a lot of, and throughout these essays, I did a lot of revealing about myself. I told the story of my mother, who was a victim of sterilization, as were a lot of Black women in the Black Belt area of Alabama, probably Mississippi, Georgia, and throughout the South. And I told that story because I think that was a story that's been lost, because a lot of people, as they talk about women's rights, they don't talk about the fact that a lot of women, that right was taken away from them back in the 1960s. So I wrote about that. I also wrote about my own story of dealing with an ectopic pregnancy and how I didn't even know I was pregnant. They made a decision for me. What I could hear when they thought that I was, when I was in the OR, the operating room, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And the doctor came in and spoke to the anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist said, I can't give her this anesthesia because she's pregnant. And the doctor said, you can give it to her. She can't have it anyway. But they didn't know that I could hear what they were saying. That's how I found out I was pregnant. So the choice was taken away from me, although I may have made the same decision, but I should have been part of the decision. And oftentimes what happens in communities is that they're not given the opportunity to make these decisions. In addition to that, I also write about my genealogy. In my genealogy, I write about how I have, if you were to take a DNA test, which I'm pretty big on because I've met a lot of my family that was separated and lost touch with each other as a result of the Great Migration, or as a result of having to leave the South, under the cover of night. And we've reconnected, but I've also reconnected with people around the world. And I talk about climate change and how climate change has impacted a lot of the communities that I'm descended from. And you will also find the same is true, not just the immediate communities that we're in, but the communities that we're from and that we're also connected to. As a result of my work globally, I've had the opportunity to work with the UN and travel. And my most recent travel was in October of last year when I was invited to the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, which was the Pope's encyclical on climate change. And I had the opportunity to go to Castel Gandolfo, which is the home, which is the summer home of the Pope. And there were people there from around the world, the global family, that are fighting these same issues around sanitation, around access to water, and around climate change. And to put it more broadly, around environmental justice. And I saw that environmental injustice exists around the world. And I think in order for us to be able to get to where we need to be and to have the policies in place to protect the health of everyone, we need to reach out and collaborate with people globally as well as people throughout the United States that are dealing with the same problem. So as we move forward, we're concerned about, someone asked a question about extreme heat. Recently, I don't know, I don't think that the data centers by themselves are causing the extreme heat. I think that what is happening, that the data centers are contributing to heat islands for sure. The evidence has proven that. We're also concerned that uh, if the data centers are using uh, gas, and a lot of them, the big problem with data centers is that they have to cool those servers, especially the hyperscale data centers. They have to cool these servers, and in order to cool these servers, they got to have generators. I'll just look to Memphis to see what's happening there, and that can give you an idea what to expect. And recently, because we've been collecting a lot of information on data center development around the nation, recently my project manager shared with me an article from about Richmond County, North Carolina, where they're building a data center there. They cannot get generators now because the generators are not keeping up with the demand. So they ordered 650 jet engines. Imagine living near a plant that is running 650 jet engines. The noise, not only the noise, but think about what they're putting into the atmosphere that people are breathing in. And when you combine the fact that climate change, because of the CO2 that we're already putting into the atmosphere, climate change is causing these extreme heat waves, these extreme weather events. We're going to have more of them. We're having fires where we've never had fires before, and it's impacting everybody. It impacted the vulnerable communities first, but it's impacting everybody now. And this is an opportunity for us to reach out, develop alliances. We have gone around the country and traveled in places where we thought we wouldn't be welcome, but found that we were welcome, like in East Palestine. Well, we've also gone to the colonias, which is along the U.S.-Mexican border. It's a large unincorporated area where there are people that you have so many people living there. It's not the typical rural areas. They're just unincorporated. I remember going there. I was invited by a group from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And when I went there, they said, don't mention sanitation. They mentioned it to us. Everywhere we went, they talked about the issues they were having with sanitation problems, where the infrastructure didn't work properly, where the sewage was backing up into their homes, or they could smell the sewage from a treatment plant. So those are the kinds of problems that exist across the country. And the way we've been able to elevate it is not just through my writings, but also developing relationships and collaborating with people from around the country. That has been a way in which we have been able to expand the message, to invite people to see for themselves, and also to figure out whether or not we can have ways in which we could work together to promote what they're doing. One of the places that we went to was a place called Centerville that's located in Illinois. And in Centerville, people were having problems as well with their sanitation. And I wrote about it in my book, Waste. And they are now working on active solutions. Someone asked the questions about the summit and whether or not it was going to be in person. The summit, yes, is in person, and there will be no virtual option. But if you're interested in attending, feel free to email me at cflowers@creej.org, and we will get you information on it. And finally, I wanted to mention, we're also working on we have an internship program. So if you have young people that are interested in learning more about data centers or interested in doing research in their communities about data center development and the impacts it can have on health and well-being, please also send an email to Creej or send an email to me, and I'll put you in touch with the people that are working on that particular that particular project. So yes, I think that I just want to wrap up by saying this is an opportunity for you to document your experiences. I think that one of the things that's been helpful to me is being able to write, and I see that a lot of people here are directors of organizations. I can just see that in the chat. Write your experience, write about it. These books can be guides for young people that are coming behind us doing this work so that they won't have to start at square one. And that's why I write. So that's why my next book is going to also provide guidance for how to work across communities. And my specialty has been in rural communities, being a country girl and embracing that. And if I don't know whether people realize it or not, but it's rural communities that are deciding who our elected officials are. And when they call, I try to go. And in the fall, I'm scheduled to go to the University of Nebraska at Kearney, rural community. I've never been to Nebraska, but I earned my degree from online from my master's degree from the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and they're giving me an award. And I'm sure I'm one of the few African Americans that's probably ever received an alumni award from them. But it's important for me to go and develop those relationships. I've also been invited to Arkansas. I'll be speaking in a rural college there as well. We have to have these alliances. The only way we're going to be able to help our communities is reaching out, working with other people, and letting them know that they're also in harm's way. And that's how I have been able to reach lots of people around the world and get the kind of attention that we needed to have in rural Lowndes County and continue to do the same. And if we could ever be helpful to any of your communities, please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Flowers, for your work and your expertise and your witness and how it informs your work and your activism, which I know resonates with a lot of our participants, our family and network in Cleveland. Of course, Kimberly Phillips, calls Cleveland, Ohio, as we famously know, Alabama North. Just like Philadelphia is up south, as Matthew Countryman says. We're all Southerners. Cynthia Tucker says the Southernization of the United States. So, family, it's good to be able to talk with you. And we do have a number of questions in the chat. One of the questions I know that Maria Smythe talks about is related to the data center. It is ironic, not surprising, and peculiar and bizarre that the site of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the Selma Montgomery March, would be the site where they want to build a hyperscale data center. Can you talk about that? And the large question, give us some insights on how to combat that and what's going on to combat that, and what more can we do, north, south, east, and west, to push back against that?
Well, first of all, I think that let me say this, data centers have been around. If we didn't have data centers, we wouldn't have these cell phones. We wouldn't be able to have this virtual conference today. So there will be data centers. The problem is that there has not been the kind of community engagement around building them and where they should be. And one of the problems that we have found throughout the country as we've looked at this issue, and it's also true in Lowndes County, is that they operate under the cover of darkness with these NDAs in place. So by the time people find out what's going on, it's too late. But there are so many people around the country now that are not satisfied with what's happening with these centers because they have seen an increase in their power bills. One of the places that has the largest amount, one of the largest amounts of data centers in the U.S. is Loudoun County, Virginia. But my friends in the DMV and the DC area are complaining about how their power bills have gone up. There are people in Texas that are talking about the data centers because they have to cool these data centers. And in some cases they use water, and they talked about their wells running dry. one of the problems that we've said that they haven't looked at in Lowndes County, if they're going to have, they say they're going to have a closed loop system, but we don't see that as being a reality because they're going to have to probably use water. If the septic systems are failing already, they're going to fail even more when they start reducing the water pressure, because in Georgia, there are people that are complaining about their water pressure going down as a result of these data centers using lots of water. These data centers can use, one hyperscale data centers can use enough power that can probably power a city with 80,000 homes. That's a lot. And we do not have the infrastructure for that. Think about every time we have bad weather, the first thing that happens, the power goes out. These data centers have to have constant power. And one of the concerns is if they have to have constant power, are they going to use nuclear? And if you look at where they're placing these centers, who's going to be in harm's way when that fails? And we've had those experiences before. That's why it's important for us to read for ourselves and learn history, because a lot of us are, we get our news just from YouTube and only get a few minutes of it, and you don't understand the history behind some of these things and why we have these environmental protections in place. But they're no longer in place anymore. We have an administration that doesn't care about that. So consequently, we are all in harm's way. So data centers are a problem. What has happened in Lowndes County in terms of how people are fighting it, they have been connecting with other communities in Wisconsin, because this particular project, the company, the developers is named Cloverleaf, and they call it Project Red Clay. If you know anything about the rural communities, we got a lot of red clay, a lot of red dirt. So Project Red Clay, they've tried to go to 2 other communities and they've run them out. So now they're trying to do it in Lowndes County. The area where they want to build this data center is next to one of the campsites for the Selma to Montgomery March. Is actually the homestead for Congresswoman Terry Sewell's family. Her grandfather is from Lowndes County. And that is and it's the part of Lowndes County where a lot of people live because it's close to Montgomery. But there has not been the kind of and they want a 30-year tax abatement. That's not helping the community. These data centers, they claim that it is helpful for economic development because it is going to create so many jobs. The jobs that they're going to create, the 1,000 or so jobs will be temporary construction jobs. They're not going to hire local people for that. They're going to hire people that build data centers for that. They will come in and they're going to leave. It is not going to benefit the community. In addition to that, they're probably, in terms of full-time jobs, there's probably no more than 12 to 15 people that are in there, and they plan to replace them with AI. So at the end of the day, the community doesn't benefit. You're dealing with heat islands. People are talking about lights being on 24/7 and hearing the noise from the hums of those turbines, or in the case now of some, it's going to be the hum from these jet engines. And if you know anything about being in the country, when I lived in the country, if I sat on the porch, I could hear a car coming down the road before it got to me. So if you hear jet engines all night long, it's going to carry far and wide. The sound is going to be a lot louder there than it would probably be in an urban area that has buildings up and around. So there's lots of, and I'm a vet, and I'm suffering from tinnitus now because when I was in the military, I was in personnel, but the personnel office was on the flight line, and the flight line had planes coming in and out. And I didn't realize that the hum that I'm hearing all the time in my ear now is from years ago. That's what people will be exposed to. So we're asking people to be intentional, start watching what's happening in terms of when there's room for public comment, they have to apply for permits in some cases. Be present at these meetings. A lot of these decisions are being made on a local level. So you need to go to your city council meetings, you need to go to your county commission meetings, whoever is part of the governing community where you are located, because it's different in different communities. But if you need to be aware of that and pay attention, because by the time it happens, Like here in Birmingham, for an example, there are 2 data centers within a few miles of each other that they're building in Birmingham. Fisk University is building one on the campus. The president is defending that right now. You know, I just hope the other HBCUs don't start doing the same thing without having the kind of, I know they need money, but all money is not good money. I'll stop there.
Yes, ma'am. No, you don't have to stop. I think, you are on point with it, and I think we all agree, and I'm sure everyone in the chat is agreeing. And of course, there's been conversations at Fisk and a lot of other places, and that goes along with how they have starved HBCUs, Black institutions, and Black communities and Black neighborhoods of resources, but then bringing those gargantuan behemoths of campuses that don't provide jobs and are sapping up resources. And like I said, now it's spilling over, a terrible, metaphor, to rural areas as well. And of course, we exist in rural areas too. I grew up in South Carolina, got family in Alabama and Mississippi and other places too. And of course, when you talk about the correlation with water issues in Jackson, Mississippi, and the residents there have been fighting like those in Lowndes County and others for a while against all those efforts. And in Cleveland, and our executive director says there are 220 data centers, and she's been a champion of make sure lead is not in water and the lead contamination, how it affects all of us. So I just want to thank you that your witness is an example that resilience is a superpower. And that's one of the reasons why resilience is in our name as an institution, but it's because of your testimony, your courage and witness that continues in the tradition of the civil and human rights tradition of mothers and fathers and others from way back, that we're able to continue this fight. But I just want to ask you also if you can talk more about the power of storytelling and people talking to people in the community and how valuable that is. I just want to say the first data centers are people. The human computers, Dr. Katherine Johnson, all the others, and others. And so that's the blueprint and the model for all this other stuff. But how can you have a democracy? How can you have any of that if you don't, as you say, talk to the people and ask the people? So what can we do to persuade those institutions and other people to listen to us and to center us in these local, state, and federal issues?
The first thing we can do is vote. Because a lot of this is happening because a lot of us did not vote, or we voted against our interests. And that is why, and in a lot of these communities, that is what's happening with these officials. They are, a lot of people are being voted out now because they did not listen to the people. And I think that this particular issue is going to have a major impact on the election cycle in November. I mean, we are seeing that last night Justin Pearson won in Tennessee, although they redistricted Tennessee and tried to gerrymander, but he still won the nomination. So we're going to see, and I mentioned Tennessee and Memphis in particular because of Colossians 1, 2, and 3, which is an example of how you shouldn't build data centers. But the part of the problem is they are turning this stuff into critical infrastructure. And by saying it's critical infrastructure, they're trying to set it up like they've done Cancer Alley, where you can't even go next to those petrochemical plants and take pictures or anything. They will arrest you for that. Same thing. I think they're trying to do the same thing with these data centers. And the first thing we can do is stay engaged, be alert, be vigilant, attend these meetings, and vote. Voting is going to be critical. And when people don't vote, we have what we have. This about a week ago, I think Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, came out and said that they were going to have a moratorium on data centers. After she said that, the person who was running for governor for the GOP here in Alabama, Terry Tuberville, came out and said that Alabama was open for business for data centers, especially rural areas. He made a lot of people upset when he said that. And then a day later, the president came back and said the same thing. But a couple of days ago, the governor of Texas came out and said, we're going to put a pause on data centers until we do an audit so we can see the impact it's having on our environment, because Texas comes first. So we don't know whether that was a political move because it's the election season, it's going to go back to business as usual. But clearly the people involvement in speaking out is making a difference. And what is happening in Lowndes County is that a lot of people are writing op-ed pieces about why this should not be along the Selma to Montgomery Marsh Trail. So if any of you are on this, that are in this meeting, if you feel moved to do so, please contact us about that, because we're asking people. Yesterday, I spoke with one of my board members who is a daughter of Muhammad Ali, who's also writing an op-ed about why that data center shouldn't be along the Selma to Montgomery Marsh Trail. But it's going to take that type of engagement in order to bring about changes to the way they do business. And voting is critical.
Yes, ma'am, you are 100% correct on that. And all across the country, it's affecting all of our communities and neighborhoods. This has been a generational fight and battle, but we have to be generationally resilient and strong, because we know what we're up against, and our power is together as a people. And when you mention and talk about Cancer Alley, I know a little bit about that part of the country, and so our experiences are a centerpiece of all of what's happening all across the country. I want to ask you if you could just talk about in your writing, Holy Ground, and waste, and then your upcoming work on data centers. If you could talk about that journey as a Southerner, native mother and daughter of the South, as a global citizen and leader, who has sat with major leaders across the country, but you are a major leader yourself. They've been blessed and privileged to be in your presence as well. How would you share your reflections and thoughts about that journey and the power of voice for everyday people to use their voice, whether they come from rural, inner city area, wherever, to be able to to help give sort of insight and energy into what's going on, and how powerful voice is individually and collectively at a time like this?
Well, I think that voice will always be important. I think if books and our stories were not important, it wouldn't have been against the law for slaves to learn how to read. And I used to tell my students that all the time when they told me they didn't like to read. And that's one of the most powerful things we can do. And also to write our stories. Because, I know that I remember somebody used to say that, who writes the story is the one that's going to end up, they're going to tell it from their point of view. And we need to tell it from our point of view. So that's why I thought it was so important for me to write my own story, because no matter what happens later, when people try to distort what I've done, and I had experienced a lot of you doing this work, you're going to experience that too. Write your own stories. And that's what I thought was important. So my journey, first of all, I started writing when I was in high school. Even further than that, I think I was inspired by the Jackson 5. I wrote a song when I wrote a song when I was 10 years old entitled "You Gotta Have Soul." And I don't know whether you all remember, my mother used to get True Story magazine. And in True Story magazine, they had people in there where if you had a song that you wanted to poem, that they could turn to a song and make a recording. That I used to do that. that started me writing. And then from there, I started writing stories. And a lot of the stuff I kept over the years, and I would write short stories and I would write editorials. I saved all of that. And when it was time, someone just approached me and said, "Catherine, it's time for you to write a book." Actually, the first person to approach me in recent times was a doctor named Paul Farmer. And Paul Farmer was the founder of Partners in Health. And he reached out to me and he said, "I have been in touch with the people at the University of California publishers. He said they published my book. They're interested in talking to you. So they reached out to me and they offered me a book deal. At the same time, someone contacted me from the New Press and offered me a book deal. And that book deal ended up leading to what me actually writing Waste. And then from there, this particular book. So I encourage everybody to write your stories, no matter how insignificant you think they are, they can be inspirational to someone else. All right. I guess I'm still here. Okay. I see Dr. Williams is back online. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being here and stay in touch. Um, I put my email in the chat so that we can all, stay in touch. And if we could be helpful and collaborate on anything, we're here.
Yeah. I got to rush to another meeting, but just want to thank you, Ms. Coleman Flowers, for your work and encourage everyone to get back and be in touch with you. But we want to thank you so very much for sharing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You all take care.
Thank you so much, Ms. Coleman Flowers. I got to run to another session, but just want to thank you again so much. Oh.